Before we set off on our much-needed winter break, we showed you all how to build the perfect Christmas tree formation with a little help from our friends over at Sports Interactive. So what better way to kick off the new year than by dialing it up a notch? We've re-enlisted the help of Jack Serres from Sports Interactive. Jack Serres, welcome back to the Football Manager Show.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to be back.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to have you back. And as we said, the last episode was part of a 3-part process. Today is the intermediate section of our tactical trilogy. We looked at beginners last time. This is part 2. The Trequartista strikes back. Now, we'll get into formations in a little bit, because last time we spoke about tactical styles, such as control possession, direct counter-attack, and wing play. But this week, I think it's worth talking about the differences in team mentality. Now, Jack, what I'm going to ask for you is if you can explain to us and the listeners the difference between a cautious mentality, a balanced mentality, and a positive mentality.
Yeah, so the balanced one, we'll start off with the easy one. That keeps everything as reasonable as possible. And if you had no team instructions, it would keep everything quite, I guess balance is the right word, in terms of like your tempo, your passing style, all that type of thing, right? So all of these things would be pretty much standard across the boards. If you were to go to, for example, cautious, naturally some of the team settings, the way that the tactic is going to work is going to be slightly different. So defensive line will naturally be slightly lower. So if you were to switch it there, if you got out of possession, Aaron. So it says standard, but that standard is going to be slightly different to the standard of a balance, for example. So it's going to be slightly different in that sense. And the way your team engages and multiple different things in the way that it affects the players and the ball. The more aggressive your mentality, the more risks they're going to take, especially in possession. So if you were to go to positive, for example, where it says tempo there, the players on the ball more likely to play more aggressive passes and runs off the ball as well, that type of thing. And I think that's about as simple as I could put it without getting into specific examples.
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot, especially when FM23 first came out. The term risk and reward was being used a lot, wasn't it? And just having a look there, going back down that side panel, Aaron, where you're adjusting these mentalities. From what I'm getting from this one, as you say there, you're saying about playing on cautious. It's not necessarily that your players are going to play those long raking passes. They're going to be a bit more considered, I presume. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's. I think one thing that gets lost with it though as well is it's your formation, right? So if you've got, for example, a formation like the one we have right here, where we've got 3 centre backs and 4 players across that sort of next line. If you were to play cautious mentality with this sort of tactic, they've got a lot of players in front of them that they can pass to that are safe passes. So if you're on a cautious mentality, they're probably going to look to use them and utilise them quite a lot, which is why I think sometimes you see this tactic in particular, or this formation rather, do pretty well in terms of possession for AI side. So that's sort of how, the obvious link there is with the risk and the formation as well.
Aaron, and if you can just talk us through the formation you actually got on the screen right now, because Jack's saying there about this is a standard formation you'd expect the AI to play. Talk us through it.
Yeah. Well, we've got a 3-4-1-2. The game likes to call it a 5-2-1-2, so it depends who you are and what you like to call it. It's got 2 DMs, which we know by now there's a massive change from FM22 to FM23. There's a lot of protection for the back 3, but also in midfield, the 2 DMs, they maybe, if I was to use this system, I would have my 2 DMs. They can be able to progress with the ball, kind of bridging that gap between the defence and the attack. It's a very, very balanced formation, and Jack already touched on it. There's a reason why the AI use it, and they can get good possession numbers as well. Especially a team like Tottenham Hotspur in the game.
Now, Jack, Aaron's saying there's 2 DMs. Now, do they have to be DMs or can there be something different? I mean, we've got DM and we've got ball winner on defend, but DM's on support duty.
Yeah, so there was a big change this year to have pivot players be used in the DM slots rather than the CM slots. It was a big change this year. So defensive midfielders this year behave completely differently to how they used to in FM22 and everything that went before. And they're a lot more aggressive in their tactical position in possession, so a lot more aggressive going forward. So if you were to want this. If you were to use this formation last year, you might play it as with 2 CMs, right? And you might want to use a box-to-box midfielder. So this year, what you would do instead is you'd have 2 pivot players, and you might use a segundo volante. Now, a segundo volante, it sounds like a fancy name, but think box-to-box midfield player. He's going to get box-to-box. He's going to get quite high in his tactical position. There isn't too much difference in the position he should take up with the box-to-box midfielder. The box-to-box midfielder may go slightly earlier on their runs, but, most of the time you want 2 pivot players to stop and recycle the ball first, then break later. And if that is what you want a segundo volante, not a box-to-box midfield player.
Okay, now you're talking here, sorry, just again to recap very quickly before we bring Aaron back in. You're saying there about these 2 sort of defensive midfielders sitting quite deep. So if you're looking on the screen there, it's essentially a mix of 4 across the midfield with the wing backs as well in that raised position. Now, you can of course move those players up into what you said there was the central midfielder slot, the traditional CM slot. With that, is that more of a balance or a positive mentality trait? Because are you then sort of sacrificing a bit of possession, or could you play those players up in the traditional central midfielder slot? And what do you gain and what do you lose? I suppose really.
There's no way to say, there's no complete one way to play anything. But if you were to play this way, for example, your 2 central midfield players are going to press very aggressively. They're going to go and engage. Defensive midfield players, central midfield players, they're going to be a lot more aggressive and they're likely to go and engage and press, especially if you had a ball in midfielder in a central midfield slot. As pivots, they're likely to be way more controlled, look to screen a lot better, and look to man mark players if players go into their area, for example. So I'd say that, the risk would be that they'd go and engage and leave their position a lot more because they're considered more like central midfield players and more like, for example, a De Bruyne and Silva would be used in a 4-3-3 would be used as central midfield players. So you'd have to be very careful, I think, if you wanted to use central midfield players, what roles you used and what your settings are, including the mentality, but the pressing as well. I'd just say you have to be more careful, a lot more careful with CMs. With DMs, I think you'll cover a lot better, and it's probably what most people do look for.
So, are there any specific instructions that work nicely with certain mentalities? I'm guessing distribute quickly to the target man probably won't work well with a cautious mentality.
Well, there's 2 ways you can look at it. One is that you contradict your instructions, another is that you blend it, and it depends on how you set up things, right? So for me personally, if I was to play on a low mentality, let's take cautious in this tactic, for example, I personally would like to have a slightly quicker tempo because I don't want my team, if I'm sitting back, because cautious is affecting us out of possession as well, don't forget. So if I've not touched my defensive line, we're sat back slightly more, I want us to make sure that we're very quick on the ball to exploit the advantage that we have when we're counter-attacking, right? So if I've got 2 players up, maybe 3, when we've won the ball, I want to get to those players quickly. I don't want it to then start to retain. So I would combine a low mentality with a higher tempo. That's one way you could blend, in my opinion, the 2 ways.
Nice. Okay, so if you were then going to switch that from cautious to positive, what would you be looking to do? Because again, you're talking there, my brain's instantly going, well, hang on, cautious mentality, high tempo passing. This is the bit where I sort of go, which, where's the blend?
So if you went to positive, personally, I would probably drop the tempo down 1 because I think you'd have enough there, and then you might even put the passing down 1 notch to shorter, and you would probably get a similar. If you touched nothing else but did those 2 things, depending on your system, you could end up getting quite similar results to having cautious and having higher tempo. It's just different ways of doing it, and the different kind of settings and style of football that you want, because it affects so many different areas. There's different ways, essentially. There's different ways to play football. So you could play attacking football on a cautious mentality, and you can play defensive football on attacking mentality. You can do it any way you want, as long as you balance it out correctly. There's no wrong way to play the game.
You touched on the word balance. Is that what it's all about? So, and of course, it depends on the manager and the manager's style and what he wants. So if you want a balanced system, I'm guessing it's wise for you to, if you want to use the positive mentality, then you're going to start to knock certain things back to make it more balanced. You're balancing the risk and the control. Or if you're trying to swing it completely one way, if you want to play attacking, then you can literally, like you said, you can just start hitting complementary instructions. For an example, positive football, you can actually increase the tempo even more if you just want to go really, really ham against the opposition.
I think football's always about balance. And I think that if we would bring it back to more of the sort of beginner intermediate level for the videos, that think about how many players are you leaving back when you're in possession and attacking. That's a good rule of thumb to look at. So regardless of your formation, if you've got a load of attacking duties, you're not only leaving 2 players back when you have the ball, for example. For us, we've got 3 because we've got 3 centre-backs. But if you did only have 2, for example, in a back 4, there's a chance you might get exploited on the counter. And I think that when Nick and CJ have spoken before about how risk and reward is more prevalent this year, it's more based around that the A are a lot better exploiting where your gaps are. And they're a lot more likely, when they deploy a cautious mentality or defensive mentality, I think in previous years, as the human player, you felt like you had a good shot at beating them if they had that. Whereas this year, they're far more likely to have a cautious mentality with a higher tempo, with something more aggressive. Maybe they have more attacking duties. They're likely to exploit you slightly more and be a bit more creative with how they sit back and defend. And I think that's why people sometimes get caught a little bit more this year, because they're used to being able to just have players overload the opposition and not get punished for the imbalance. But this year, I think you get punished a little more than you did before.
So in that sense, then, maybe I'm already sitting there thinking maybe I just hit balanced and just leave that there. Is that the very much the official Tony Jameson? I don't really know what I'm doing, but if I don't touch it, I probably can't break it. Is that the mentality to go for?
So I would say this year in particular, I personally have loved balance as well. It's a really good one to start on because you can, if you leave it, the mentality is balanced, you can start to mess around with your team instructions and you can see the direct impact they have. Once you start applying mentalities to it, it's already affecting multiple other things, right? So if you keep it on balance and you want to play a short passing style, you could start off with balance and drop the passing. You could go all the way short, all the way slow for tempo. And you might realise that your attacks are pretty passive. You're not really creating chances. So do you go for more attack duties? Do you go higher tempo? You can change all these things individually and see what you think is the best thing for you. That's the advice I think I would give to somebody who isn't exactly new to the game, but maybe they're struggling to create their tactic in their head of what they want.
Excellent stuff. And I guess I'm going to take a wild punt here that the extremes are very defensive and very attacking.
They are, but you have seen a few different content creators that have shown that even with like a very defensive mentality, you can still, again, if you apply the right tempos and the right duties, you can still have a threat on very defensive and you can still be able to defend on very attacking, but they are the extremes, and it would be recommended, I think, to go to those in your extreme times of need. I wouldn't start there, let's put it that way.
Okay, that makes complete sense. Now, one thing that we will cover, and again, it's something that maybe some people need a bit of clarification on. I certainly need a bit of clarification on it. Slightly new wording in the out of possession instructions for your defensive line. Step up and drop off. Now, again, where am I thinking? Well, what's a reasonable place to start here?
So I was really happy with this introduction this year. I think previously, if you wanted to play, let's say, a high possession tactic, right? That's your idea. You're thinking Pep, you're thinking Arteta this year, that's your kind of idea. Previously, most people would go to something like a positive mentality, and what they would want as well when their team's pressing, they feel like they have to have their defensive line high because they're trying to win the ball back. But what if you want to play that style, but you happen to have slow defenders? I think previously you were sort of left with, well, you just got to deal with it. You're just going to get caught in behind, and that's sort of like how things sort of were a little bit with the instructions before. Or the alternative was that you drop your defensive line, but you left loads of space there and you got played into the space. I think a lot of people felt a bit frustrated they couldn't ask their team to start higher, then drop. So think defensive line where we have step up more and drop off more. Think of it like a behaviour. So you can set your line. If we set the line to very high, for example, our defensive line, so we can ask our defensive line to start very, very high. Maybe we've got a slow back line. Maybe we select drop off more with it so that they start high and they try to support the team's press. When we're pressing the opposition, the defensive line start high, but the minute the opposition retain a few passes, 3 or 4 passes, and they've got some time and space, then the defensive line drops. So you can get the best of both worlds, and it's a lot more, I think, anybody that's done any coaching, it's a lot more realistic to what you would ask your defense to do in real life. If there's no pressure on the ball, the defensive line tends to drop. That's something very basic in coaching, regardless of your tactical style. So it's very nice to be able to encourage it. And it works the opposite way around too, right? You can sit very defensively right in front of your own goal, but you don't want to sit there for 90 minutes. Even Simeone teams will look to try and step out as high as they can within their own tactical ideas and beliefs. They still don't want to sit on the 6-yard line the entire match. So you could do it the opposite way around too. And that's the idea of it. And I think it's a really good addition to the game. And yeah, again, I just stress, think of it as a behaviour, not an additional instruction on top of the defensive line already. So very high defensive line step up more doesn't mean they'll just go even higher. It's a behaviour, and it's very important, I think, to distinguish that between where they're set and how they behave.
Excellent stuff. So, like last week, we're going to give you the tactic. You've given us there. You've given us all your players just out there in that 3-5-2. I suppose yourself and Aaron, take it away. Let's build this tactic, Jack. How are you going to do it? Talk us through the player roles first of all, and then any particular instructions you might want to be giving these guys as well.
So for me, if I was doing this for the first time and it was like my first experiment at trying to do this sort of system and trying to create a system in the game, I'm going to start off with, I'm going to go positive mentality, I think. We'll start off with positive mentality. And then we'll go with a sweeper, keeper, defend. And the back three. On the sides, we're going to have a ball-playing defender. Let's go ball-playing defender on the left. And a wide centre-back on the right. I'll go wide centre-back, support. Let's go support. You want to go attack, don't you, Aaron? You want to go aggressive? Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, and I think, support. So I think support or defender would be going with in the back.
Yeah, and so the difference between the ball-playing defender and wide centre-back is the wide centre-back is likely to take up much wider positions, especially early on, and then again, further advanced. They're more likely to get much higher and wider than a standard ball-playing defender. Even with a ball-playing defender that has, stay wider instruction, the wide centre-back has its own preset instructions to go a lot more aggressive and to be able to overlap and support the attack a little more. So that's the main difference between those two. And I probably would go support to see how it plays first before I would go to attacking if it was the first one.
Yeah.
this is the thing that I've noticed already. We're only just on the defence here now. Compared to last week, of course, we went for very simple roles. I'm going to use the word symmetry, I suppose, really. You want everyone to sort of play quite simple, similar roles. Here already into the intermediate instructions, we're looking at a ball-playing defender with a wide centre-back, so two defensive defenders and then a support defender. So again, just for remembering for when you're playing the game yourself, you can... Real football is slightly out of balance, isn't it? You wouldn't necessarily always see players exactly doing the same instruction on the exact same side, because otherwise it would be easy to mark. I'm presuming that's how you've wanted to replicate that in the game, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's something that we can't really do yet in the game. For example, I can't say to both my centre-backs, when the ball's your side, you're the wide centre-back and the other one stays more central. So you've got to then be creative about how you want to ask your players to do things. And I think that's one of the biggest things here. But for me personally as well, for the middle centre-back, I'd make sure that he's on a cover duty, because if you've got two centre-backs that are likely to be more wide and more aggressive, I want my middle centre-back to be the first one that drops in case there's a ball in behind. So I don't have a cover duty. I would probably go libero myself, but I wouldn't recommend maybe to start off with that. Let's stick to the central defender cover maybe. We'll go with that for now.
And yeah, like you were saying about the different roles as well. For me, the reason why I am a big fan of choosing different roles on different sides of the pitch, unpredictability. Like currently I've got two inside forwards, but personally they're doing different things. I've got them doing different things in player instructions, but it's like I wouldn't want one wing on one side and another wing on the other side, because it's literally just the same thing down both flanks, and there's no unpredictability plus personnel as well. In my squad, I might not actually have two perfect left wingers, or one might be more creative, one might have high vision and passing, so actually I might want him to be an inverted winger so he can cut inside and use that creativity, that key pass and his vision, whereas on the other side we've got one person literally just staying wide, stretching pitch, and we've got unpredictability on both sides of the pitch. Sorry, I just had to get my 2 pence.
No. that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense, because again, I've had similar experience myself with like an inverted winger, but like having a full back on attack going beyond as well. But then on the other side, just a standard winger getting to the byline, so to the touchline. So that makes complete sense. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move slightly up the pitch now. We're going to get towards those areas we're just starting to talk about, those wing backs now. Are wing backs going to stay on support, Jack, on auto, or are we going to change those up?
Okay, so this is a preference thing, but traditionally for me, I personally like to have my wing backs either on attack or have a complete wing back on support. And the reason is that I want to make sure that with my DMs recycling the ball and being slightly deeper in the build-up, I need my wing backs to make sure they're as high and wide as they possibly can be. And then also it gives us our width in attack. So I think it's really important to have aggressive wing backs for me personally. I always think that it's useful to have. Some people would prefer to maybe have more conservative one side and more attacking the other. Lots of teams, especially lower league teams in England in the Championship and below, do tend to have one more orthodox fullback playing wing back than almost like an orthodox winger or wing back playing the other. So they end up having one defensive, one attacking. Yeah. So something like that I think works quite well, having one attack, one support. What would you do, Aaron, with this?
Yeah, I'm the same. I personally just love wing backs, so automatically I'm not even looking at complete wing backs or inverted wing backs, none of that. I'm literally going straight to wing backs. I think for me, I just love the fact they're very aggressive off the ball as well. And again, they've got no defensive support on this flank as well. So I personally love wing backs, if I'm honest with you, on this game. And it's more of they're the blank canvas on the flanks where you've got the option, the availability to actually go into their player instructions and ask them to do certain things. So you can ask one to sit more narrow and ask the other to stay wider. One can dribble more, the other can dribble less. The other can take more risk and the other can take fewer risks. So that's why I love to use both wingbacks or both fullbacks and wingbacks.
Excellent stuff. Now, if we start filling in those central roles, then we get into the creative bits in the middle. So let's talk about these two DMs, shall we?
So I think most teams are going to want one holder and one more mobile box-to-box type. Some teams may go with two, but I think for the right one, we've got complete wing back and we've got a wide centre-back on that side. So I think the right-hand side one, you're going to want something on defend duty. So it could be a deep line playmaker defend, it could be a defensive midfielder defend, something to that nature I think would work well on that side. Just, again, we're thinking about when we have the ball high at the pitch, how many players do you have back? So if we were to change deep line playmaker to Segundo Volante attack, for example, let's change him to that. If we have him there, in our attacks, we're going to end up with three players on the right-hand side, all probably quite aggressive high up the pitch, or definitely not setting possession very well. And we're going to get counted on that side quite a lot. So I think it's essential, if you're going to go aggressive with a wide centre-back and a complete wing-back, that you have to have a holder there to compensate for that. So I'd go deep line playmaker, defend, and then on the left side, we can afford to be way more aggressive because we're going to have the left centre-back and the middle centre-back there as well. On the left-hand side, they're already going to be set. So you could probably go Segundo Volante support, I would go with. That's effectively a box-to-box midfielder, just with a fancy name for us. So that's what I would go with personally there for me.
Excellent stuff. And then up in this number 10 role, and then talk us through those big two strikers at the top.
So depending on the team you've got, it could be quite different. So if I've got two excellent strikers to use, I may go advanced playmaker attack, and I might use him on a support or attack duty. It doesn't really matter which, I suppose, for this purpose. And I would probably go with a pressing forward support on the left-hand side and an advanced forward on the right. And the reason for that is I've already got complete wing back and wide centre back both being quite aggressive, and I don't really want my striker to drop into that space. I want that if those two are building on the right hand side, I want to have the space to be able to play that striker in behind. If I'm being direct, it depends what style of football you want to play. And on the left side, we've got wing back already going wide. We've got a Segundo Volante pushing up as well. And you've got more of a chance to create on the left and exploit on the right. That's how I'm sort of looking at that there.
I'm looking at it the exact same way. So I'm seeing the pressing forward. If we click on him, he holds up the ball. So imagine he's got the ball, he's holding up, and then you've got your Segundo Volante. He could be making runs off him, and then you've got the wing back on attack as well, making runs, and then you've got your advanced forwards on the right hand side, of course, trying to break through as well. Also, what I like with the advanced forward and the complete wing back on the right hand side is that you could you're actually pushing players back. So the advanced forward, you could be telling him to be sitting on that defence, and he's pushing it back, and then you're literally creating space for this advanced playmaker in between lines, which is very dangerous. And if we're using Manchester City here, just imagine Kevin De Bruyne being able to play in space here. He's got the pressing forward to play to, the advanced forward to play to, and then he can look out wide as well, the wider options, the wing back, and then the complete wing back on the right hand side as well.
Excellent stuff. Love it. That was pretty rounded for me, to be honest. Obviously, we can change stuff up with regards to mentality. There's a thing there. Maybe for next week, you've mentioned pressing forward on support there. I've noticed a role pressing forward on defend, which I quite enjoy. So we might have a look at that next week. And I can't believe, Jack, episode 2, the Trequartista strikes back, and you've gone with an advanced playmaker.
Well, I did think about it
next week.
I did think about it, but if it was my team, I don't know if I'd go there. But we could throw one in there as well. But I tell you, for a little teaser for next week, if you throw the Trequartista in there, if we put that one in, so when players are on the ball, as I think it was showed in the release video in the promotion for the game this year, when players have the ball, they're making decisions about what they're going to do next. Now, this might scare you, Tony, but if we move the Trequartista to the right as a right 10, right cam on the right hand slot there, for example, now what you would get there is the players on the right hand side, when they're building with the ball, they've got a player in that line, but there's actually two lines, isn't there? There's a central midfield line we've got nobody in, and in the attacking midfield line, we've only got the Trequartista. So on the right-hand side line, they've got somebody that they can use, so they're more likely to use short passes, they can build their attack. Now on the left side, because there's nobody, the wing back and the deeper players are more likely to do one of three things. They're going to either dribble with it because the space is there, they're going to play it long in behind because there's nobody to play through to, or they're just going to retain it. So going into the experts of this little teaser, really, this is where you can start to think about how you structure your formation with a bit of an offset system, where that can really force your team to maybe create one side and exploit the other, depending on the players you've got. So just something I'd little throw in there for next time.
I can't believe that what we're going to talk about next week is something I have actually used, and I may be classed as an export expert. Who would have thought it?
That is the thing. I've seen a lot of people create tactics, and it's like, I don't think they know that's happening, but it's happening and it's very effective. But I don't think they're aware of it.
I knew why it worked last year, but I don't know how it works this year. But you know what? That Jack, that explains it perfectly. Thank you so much, as always, for coming on. Can't wait to have you on there next week. So Jack Serres from Sports Interactive, official acquaintance of the Football Manager Show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.